heat coming off of you.
God, I should have brought my other glasses, but maybe I might have that.
Oh no, getting old.
Good morning. Welcome to this bar. We're going to wait a couple more minutes for people to call in and get set. Thanks.
Hi.
Are you trying to type in from an email?
Well, I was trying to type in from an email, but I don't have the email on here.
Go on the webmail.
Okay, where's that? Yeah, see, that's why I didn't, because I don't know it.
mail.ces.gov/OWA.
Okay, wait. Now, is it HTTPS?
I'm not typing it in. I don't think.
Okay, so, okay, what was it?
mail.ces.gov/OWA.
Oh, we're late.
Well,
Dana started. Is it on mute?
No.
Yeah, no.
Good morning again.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Good morning. Great. I'm Bennett, and I work in the Office of Information Management and Analysis, or OEMA, here at the State Water Board. With me today is Sarah Fong with the Division of Administrative Services. For this webinar, we will present a review of the process for tracking ACLs and other monetary enforcement actions that are entered into CIWQS. Into the discussion, I would like to go over a few ground rules. Because a number of people on this phone line, each of us must try to do our best to eliminate unnecessary background noise. If you are not talking, please put your phone on mute. If you do not have a mute button on your phone, you can use *6 to mute and unmute your phone. Also, welcome questions to help you follow along or clarify something. I ask that if you have requests for enhancements, for example, please send them to the end of of the presentation so that we can be sure to get through the core subject. The topic has a chat feature that allows you to type in comments or suggestions. Feel free to use this if you don't want to interrupt or speak, so you don't forget at the end of the presentation. Be sure to send your chat to the host, and we Tara offering the chat feature today. In the webinar, we're going to review background information, describe the data flow and the consequences of data flow, demonstrate creating a new record, demonstrate updating an existing record. We're going to get a quiz using the polling feature. We're going to walk through the collection process and open it up for questions. I do note that this is a little complicated than some other data entry processes, and so just patient, don't get frustrated if it takes you a bit to understand the different steps in the process. If you're not talking, please put your phone on mute so we don't have random noises, please. Our board implemented the ACL billing project so that we could track what money is owed to us, administrative civil liabilities. This board can send out invoices now because the implementation of this project with CIWQS, and CIWQS is connected to our other systems, mainly FMS, and then FMS is and provides information back to CIWQS, and we'll see a diagram of this data flow slide. You see data about what is being assessed from the ACL is entered into CIWQS, and then on a nightly process, it goes into AFBS, and then in AFBS, it goes into FMS. These systems state invoices to be sent out to the responsible parties and should be sent to State Board, where they will be deposited and entered into FMS as being received. And so that's represented by this orange here. Those are the payments being entered. FMS then sends information to CalSTARS, which is the state's accounting system, and that information from FMS is sent back to AFBS and then finally back to CIWQS. And so it creates a whole loop. Once the information gets back to CIWQS as being paid, the person related to as staff to the enforcement action is sent an email. The CIWQS coordinator also receives this email, and there are no additional outstanding milestones. Staff must make the regulatory measure historical. More information on FMS. Mentioned it's the Water Board's accounting system. It tracks what is owed. So create account receivables or ARs, what is owed, or contingent receivables, and what is paid to us. Both of these things are from application fees, annual fees, and what we're talking about here, ACLs. Also generates invoices and notices. As in the previous slide, it has into CalSTARS, and it has customers, and those are based on our WDID. When milestone in CIWQS, that becomes a receivable in FMS. Again, contingent receivables are what's potentially owed to us, and these are milestones that are recorded as liabilities in complaints, and it hasn't been ordered that those liabilities be paid for POS, they're proposed, and all projects, whether they're in complaints or orders. And then account receivables are those that actually owed to us, and those would be represented by the milestones and liabilities in orders, where it's been ordered that that amount would be paid to us. This data flow situation that we have created between CIWQS and FMS, the information from the milestone within CIWQS has been transferred to FMS, it can be deleted CIWQS, otherwise you'd have an orphaned in FMS, and therefore, if you have a milestone within CIWQS, this must be changed to either modified, and you use that if you've made a mistake in recording the milestone, superseded when a different amount has been is reading the original milestone, or marked as completed. The customer within FMS is revolved on the WDID, and that, again, it provides the connection between what is owed as documented in CIWQS and customer owes it as documented in FMS. And all ACL records must have a WDID. We are to leverage that customer record within FMS to some of the billing addresses, or majority of the billing addresses for ACLs. So if the customer already exists in FMS, then the billing address is from that customer record and displayed in the ACL record. And so basically you have a base order, an enrollee that's receiving annual fees. Customer already exists in FMS, and so if you're using the same WDID, the same billing address will be used. If existing customer exists in FMS, then you have to enter the billing address into your ACL record. You have a situation where the person that's receiving the annual fee invoice is different than the person that should be receiving the ACL invoice. In this case, which would happen in ownership change of a site, where you're still pursuing enforcement from something that happened in the past, but the site has gone on to be owned by somebody else. In this case, you have to have two different WDIDs. Who record gets a new WDID if it's the new, if it's the base enforcement or the base order enrollee that gets the new WDID, or if it's the ACL record that gets the new WDID. It kind of depends on where in the process you're made aware that two different billing addresses are needed. If you start enforcement action and then the ownership changes, then I would suggest making your new WD assigned to the base order. If it has transferred and then later this enforcement action is pursued to the old owner, then it's easier to make the new WDID associated with the ACL record. The project for CIWQS was implemented in 2012, and then DAS has been able to report more accurate account receivable reports to the Department of Finance and the CIWQS office, and they're in a better position if the water boards were to be audited, because there's more confidence in the numbers, at least those that are coming from CIWQS. So that, in that regard, the project has been successful. We have a work to do for our other systems, namely smarts and eRIMs. Now we're going to on to our CIWQS and I'm going to do a demonstration in our test database. To a complaint, our enforcement wizard with a violation record, and that violation record must have a responsible party, must be associated with the water board, and must also be linked to originating place, and must have the status of violation. Then from there you follow the questions and prompts wizard guides you through. I've logged myself into the test database. You have to have the entry rights to enter regulatory measures. If you have those, then you should be able to do this type of enforcement action. Show briefly on the slide, we're going to start with violation record 96950. Oh. Okay, 96950. And we have this record. It comes up. It's for SWRCB wastewater treatment plant. And we go down to the linked enforcement action tab and launch an enforcement action wizard. And here's where the questions start. Money involved with this action. And since ACLs have to do with money, we'll say yes. As just in that text by the box, bring an ACL complaint, but if you had an order, an expedited payment, or a pre-complaint letter, there's many returns, but generally things that are going to or likely going to lead to us assigning a monetary value or a monetary amount, will answer yes to this question. You get see the WDID that's currently associated that we associated to the ACL that's being created, and it comes from the regulatory measure that's related to this violation, which would be kind of what's determining the base order or enrollee, depending on the situation. If you had the case where you had an ownership change and you wanted to assign a new WDID, it would be where you would do it at this step. You got update button. I'm going to move on to select the type of action. And ours is an administrative civil liability. We get to modify the program if that's needed, but again, it's pulled from the violation record that you're starting from. Notice that there's some signs that it means it's conditionally required for the description. It's required for deals and court settlements. And so since we're doing a complaint, we'll just type in something simple. This will show up on some of the reports we have, namely the enforcement orders report, which allows people to access the actual orders uploaded to these for formal enforcement actions. So it's good it's just aware that this field is showing up on reports. Give you a chance to verify staff. Again, it's pulled from violation record, and it asks is this a complaint or order? In our demonstration, we're saying we're starting with the complaint to say what's active or draft. We're going to say it's active. The issue date in my information was 16/15. You can either use the calendar icon or type it in. That number is SWRCB 15. And then add liability portion. The liability name is required, but if there's just one liability, it doesn't need to really be a descriptive name. And I'm just going to put in liability. Does liability address an MP? If even description of the full amount addresses an MP, you should be answering yes. You have the opportunity to add a liability description, though that's not required. Again, when there's just one liability and it's straightforward, probably need a description, but sometimes there are multiple liabilities, then may be helpful. Now I'm going to say no, there is not a payment plan. And we'll go ahead and select our water. You can use this lookup feature. A little bit more description of the water code that you're selecting, and it'll show you what fund that it maps to, and you have the opportunity to use these select links, and if by here would then pop it into the on screen that we're working with. Selected one. Now you enter a date. Amount. In my setup, I said it was $9,000. And then we move down to the billing information. It demonstrates that because there's a base order, it populates this billing information. It looks a little weird with the responsible party that I think that the messages that this billing information is populated. And you have an opportunity to add additional violations. I'm going to skip a step because it's, it's probably pretty straightforward. You just
Excuse me, Jarma?
Yes.
Hi, somebody just did something and we get a real loud crackling on our phone.
Oh, it stopped.
Hey.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, I don't know. I don't hear. We haven't touched anything, so I'm thinking maybe
Okay, thanks.
We'll hang up. Thank you.
Thanks.
So hopefully we followed up until now where I was describing how the billing information is showing. I'm not going to add violations for this one, though you certainly could. And the reason that I should because I have an assessment for multiple violations, but it's pretty straightforward. So we're just going to go ahead and create regular measure and a pop-up that says that it's been successfully created, and then we'll say okay, and have our enforcement action. Over to the enforcement tab, and the violation that we started from, and liability that we created in those wizard screens. So that's creating the first step, and it's the idea that within 2 days from issuance of any of the enforcement action types that we're talking about today, that just involves money, it should be entered within 2 business days from when it was issued, and so situation or our demonstration, we've done this complaint was issued, we've entered it into CIWQS, and now to move to the next step, which is updating a record involves money. And so in our example, we're going to say that the board adopts the order. They allow for a payment plan, and while this is the preferred method of allowing for payment plans, it does happen, so you did want to cover it. The order also is allowing for a SEP, $4,000, and for as you probably know, can be just a payment, just payment to a third party, or an actual work that you have to do. In this case, we're just saying it's a payment to a third party. So, back to CIWQS, that order that we just entered, and the launch update wizard. You can't do anything else. These records are locked down because of reasons I was went over earlier, that this information gets over to other systems, so change records in unknown ways could have unknown consequences. So that's why we've done to lock down records, and you can only use the update wizard to make changes. I'm going to click that update wizard or launch update wizard button, and you're prompted through questions and field to enter information. So what action do you want to perform on this instrument? I will say that the action was taken before the board. We have an opportunity again to change the staff person. Did order number change? I can say make it the next one. Adoption issue date, we'll say it's today, was the amount negotiated. Well, the amount in the end stays the same. It's in kind of different ways than just as it's represented in one sum. So I said yes, so that I have an opportunity to make changes. So then it's presented with the one milestone that we entered before. I'm going to supersede this milestone because instead of just saying use $9,000, we're saying we're going you to pay us in a payment plan schedule, pay part of it through a SEP. So I've superseded my original milestone and clicked the Add More Rows link. So as you see, the span, so I have more row milestones to fill out, and this payment plan will say that they owe us, starting out of each month, owe us $1,000. Skip the important part of, is there a payment plan? Say yes. There is, and I continue. Okay. Payments in your payment plan, it can be a little bit tedious. Hopefully you can. This one's not too bad. And again, in 10. you had a question, if you can copy and paste and demonstrate that. So yes, you can. And that's one. So we are pay schedule. We have $1,000 a month owed for 5 months, and that's rolled down to add project. So I push this button because the order is allowing for, let's call it that. You can get more descriptive with the project names if there are multiple. Yes.
Who did the amount of the monthly payments of a payment plan?
That's come from what's written in the order. That would be discussed and negotiated, in this case with the board enforcement teams that are pursuing ACL. For this presentation, we're just going off the document.
Thank you.
Real quick, I just want to mention that Jeremy mentioned it, but the debt entered into CIWQS needs to match the order. So if no payment plan was agreed upon and in writing, you can't just enter a payment plan into CIWQS. There has to be a signed agreement for payment plan, and that needs to be uploaded into CIWQS also.
Everything should be coming from the itself.
Behind the scenes, closed doors, SEPs.
I've been told you can have a payment letter that describes your payment plan after the order, after the settlement is part of the settlement, but it all have to be written in the settlement, is my understanding.
There has to be some sort of
record.
Right. There's a written record, and it has to indicate payments that are, how many payments there are, and it also has to indicate, and this is Sarah with DAS, we've been working with enforcement for language for those documents, but it also has to state in the payment plan, or however you want to describe that letter, that if they miss or late for any payment, whether it's the first payment or the fifth payment, the regional water board or the state water board has the authority to accelerate the remainder of those payments. So, again, working with the enforcement on language, but if you guys at the regional board, your attorneys have language ready, they can go ahead and use it.
As a follow-up, somebody made a comment through the chat, and that they can't authorize a payment plan, but they're later negotiated and was brought up by Jack Gregg that it could be described in a follow-up limit. And yeah, we're not trying to say anything about enforcement processes or procedures. We know that sometimes payment plans are specified, and we want to clarify that it can be the person that enters the data into CIWQS, or at that step that somebody just comes up with a payment plan idea. It has to be a written documented and specified in detail how that payment plan would work. So again, we're not trying to say anything about enforcement policy. We're just trying to, if it is specified somewhere that a payment plan is acceptable, you would enter that into CIWQS. So back to our project.
But don't forget that this is related to an MMP.
Good check.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Like,
yes, no. Okay, what's that got to do with it? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to skip over that. So again, if any part of it has to do with the MMP, that you should say yes to that box and not skip over it. Project type, there are a couple to choose from. We're selecting supplemental environmental project. you can enter a project description. It's not required. You do need to say what the total project amount is, and in our case, it's $1,000. We'll say milestone type. Again, a situation we're just expecting them to pay a third party, so a third party payment. Code. Due date. Say a month past the weekend. And status at this point is not completed. It has a milestone there. It asks additional modifications. We're going to say, if you said yes, you get the expanded screen with you can change or modify, and you can work through that. But we're going to say everything else is fine, and we're going to update our enforcement action. So we're returned with updated enforcement action. We move over to the enforcement tab again. We can check what our payment plan looks like. And down, we see that we have our initial ACL liability milestone that's superseded. We made that change. And we see our 5 milestones that have the status of payment plan. And so I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint. Oh. Sorry. Is that the status of the milestones are payment plan. An overnight process within CIWQS that checks to see if it's over 30 days, if the day's over 30 days in the future, it leaves that payment plan. But when it becomes due within 3 days, it changes it to not complete. And this is key because it's that not complete status that gets picked up and it triggers that they send over to FMS to create the receivable. And so while it says payment plan now, the first, at least tomorrow, if the process was sent in test, it would say not complete, and then the following day it would go into FMS. So I guess just important to note that status has an important function.
This only type for which we mail invoices 30 days prior to the due date. Everything else is mailed after the information is the next business after the information is entered into CIWQS. Calls from dischargers wondering why they're already getting an invoice. The due date hasn't passed. It's usually because it's a payment plan, or it'd only be because it's a payment plan.
And I wanted to note to the main enforcement tab, and we look at projects. You see 2 milestones. No, we only entered 1. 2 were created. 1 holds the milestone amount that we specified at the top of the table. It's converted that into its own separate milestone. And they're the third-party payment. Actually have a milestone amount. if somebody misses their milestone, and, this is true whether there's just 2 milestones or there's 20 milestones, if any of those milestones pass their due date, then the milestone will convert into a liability. All these will be superseded. All these milestones will be superseded, and then a new liability will be created for the milestone, for the amount of the project. And so I will go over that in the slides. So the project is converted into a liability, but before that happens, 2 weeks prior to due date, an email is sent to staff saying, hey, you have a milestone due date coming up. On the due date, another email is sent to staff. It's also sent to the enforcement coordinator, the CIWQS coordinator, and the supervisor of the staff. And when I say staff, that's the person related to the regulatory measures, so the ACL with relationship of staff. Then if that person is related to a person in so it's a party relationship with a relationship of supervisors or supervised by, then that supervisor also gets the email saying, hey, there is a due today. Make sure it's a reminder that if you have information, say that just came in the office and hasn't been updated into CIWQS yet, make sure that gets updated. Because a week after that due date, any outstanding project milestones will be superseded and a liability created for the suspended liability amount. In demonstration, that's the $4,000. Those go out to the staff, the enforcement coordinator, the CIWQS coordinator, and the supervisor of the staff.
Sounds like you're saying the total amount due becomes liability, and we can't, if we haven't stopped that process beforehand, we can't do anything about that.
With an asterisk, there are cases when it's that information just hadn't been entered into CIWQS for whatever reason, that the project milestone document in CIWQS was really completed, but CIWQS wasn't updated and the conversion happened. In that case, you have maybe 2 days to contact us and then to back out of it. Often, the voice may go out because as thinking about once it goes into FMS, the information goes into FMS, then the voices are generated, and you really have, again, maybe 2 days if, I don't know when it would be 2 days, but sometimes it's still, and so it may be that the go out, but if you talk to Sarah, and maybe she can add to it.
So as the slide shows, you do have 1 week after the due date to enter any outstanding information on, milestones, so that invoice isn't generated. But if an invoice is generated, so part of the delay might be if you see in CIWQS that your project milestone is overdue, generate an invoice, you might not see that invoice generation until the following business day. So we're ahead of you. But if you know that the information wasn't entered or you got something at the last minute and the invoice should not have gone out, or should not go out, I should say, contact us immediately. Invoice goes out and incorrect, always cancel it after the fact and, correct the milestones, but the charger will receive that invoice. And so sometimes you get worked up about it for obvious reasons, and we need to do a little bit of, apologizing for that. Probably you guys need to apologize to them. But it's not that we can't, you could always just tell them we canceled it on our end, and we can always send them a confirmation email if they need it saying, you disregard this invoice, it was created an error, or something like that. It's not that it can't be changed, it's just we really want to avoid those invoices going out inappropriately.
Yeah, and I wasn't so much worried about making a mistake or missing that notice. It sounds like there's no room for negotiation if they're late and everything's due. That's just the way it is.
That's the way it is, but that's why we tried to build in, notifications. But yeah, to a certain point, we're out of time. Yeah.
Thank you.
To go back to CIWQS and about the costs and maybe for that, you'll see 3 issues found. Didn't fill out the staff cost, the economic benefit, or the maximum potential liability. If you either go back and choose to modify, or in that last question in the previous process where it said, do you want to make other modifications? If it said yes, then you get to here where you have the opportunity to add those 3 attributes. If presented in your ACL, you should fill them out. And they're not in the ACL, so there's nothing you can do about it. It's only when they are in the ACL, it gives us additional information to report on and to know out. But here are the fields to fill out, again, if that information is contained within the ACL. Some cases where the invoice needs to be put on hold, and so it's put on hold stops the process. So if the invoice hasn't gone out, that means that it'll stop the invoice from going out if it's done in a manner. If the invoice has the original invoice has already been out, then on hold stops any collection process or any further collection process. There are 2 main reasons why something would be on hold. One is a petition, and you can note that the action has been petitioned by using the update wizard and selecting petition as the action that you want to perform, and then completing the questions and prompts that are presented. For bankruptcy, you can add a task to note that a bankruptcy determination has been made. Both of these entries will add a record to the problematic report that then GS puts the receivable on hold. It is also an idea to follow up with a phone call or an email to Sarah just to make sure that everything went through correctly and they're aware of it in a timely manner. Since we get many of them, it's again just a good idea to follow up with a phone call or email just to make sure it went through right. See that a milestone has been put on hold in the status column of the milestone record. So if a liability was on hold, you'll see that in the milestone record in the status column.
And can't emphasize enough that it's important to make sure you enter that petition and bankruptcy information and follow up with us on that, because we're supposed to collect all if a discharger, if an ACL is under a petition, or if a discharger is filed for bankruptcy. It's, I don't know the terminology is, but basically illegal for us to contact them with any invoice, late notice, or collection notice. And so if we're not aware of it, we can't stop those from going out. But if we are aware of it, we double check to make sure before we send any invoices or collection letters out for that. So just be aware that petition or under bankruptcy, or those steps are extremely important. So I don't know how each regional board does it, but notify whoever is in charge of entering information as soon as you're aware. This also includes if the petition has been dismissed from the State Water Board, but the discharger then files with the Superior Court, even though that's out of the State Water Board's process, we still cannot send any answer collection notice for those. So it still needs to be entered. We're still working on formalizing that process, but I think temporarily what we've come up with is entering a separate petition line and then making a note in the comment section what specifically is, whether it's Superior Court or some other process. So if you have any of those types of situations, you should send me an email and I can go over it with you.
Okay, so I do have to move to our polling questions. So hopefully so our first question is, I don't know that it's showing up all on your screen. It's looking kind of weird on my screen, so. Question is, I mistakenly enter a liability milestone due date as 1/20/2018 instead of 1/20/2016. What should I do? And since they're asked together, I'll go ahead and I'll read through your choices for option number 1, where you entered the wrong date for the milestone due date. Option to do nothing. Option 2 is to change the milestone status to superseded. Option 3 is change the milestone status to modified and add a new milestone with the correct due date. And option is add text to milestone comment field. And the second question is, within how many days should money-related enforcement actions be entered or updated in CIWQS from issuance or action? First option is 2 business days. The second option is 1 business day. Third is 2 weeks. And finally, staff have time. A second. Please go ahead and finish up. I'm glad to see that nobody put as staff have time. one. We're gonna go ahead and close the poll and go back over to the screen. So I'll take this. Okay. So the first question, you answered the wrong date. The answer is change milestone status to modified and add new milestone with the correct due date. Again, we can't abandon or orphan rules out there in FMS, so have special rules that signal when something should be reversed. And by using modified, you're saying this wasn't even supposed to be entered at a mistake. If you're were to use superseded, that's signaling that it's been replaced by something. And in this case, it hasn't been replaced by something real. It was just because of a mistake. So you use the modified as the status.
This is my performance. This is the performance target I have. My work plan commitment.
Can't hear a thing.
Outside talking, I think. So please use mute.
Renewed and wastewater and none of.
And the second one is within how many days should you be updating CIWQS? The answer is 2. 1 day would be great, but the expectation is within 2 days because as we've talked about, one, it's important so we know what's owed to us. And then because things happen, emails go out, invoices are generated. It's pretty dynamic. We want to make sure we're up to speed on everything that is really out there. So, no questions on the poll. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
This is Kimberly. I just have one question on the staff cost attributes. When you went over where you see issues, my question relates to the implications of not entering that data. So it's informational only is what I understood. Is that correct?
I believe that I think it's enforcement policy, and I reviewed this information for a while, but that the enforcement policy references that we should be tracking this information.
Okay.
And so we made places for it to be stored in CIWQS.
Okay.
It doesn't always get relay ACL, so then there's nothing you can do about it, but if you have it, you should enter it. Nothing in CIWQS will happen. It won't stop any processes from happening. The worst is that you see the three issues at the top of the screen, because the business rule is that those be entered, but in reality I know that they can't always be.
Okay,
Shouldn't it be changed to optional then?
Well, that's not to minimize the importance of the information.
No, the staff costs sometimes aren't. That's made at the executive level, and some they just not put in staff cost. Period. Done. Not happening. And even though it's a CIWQS rules, I think CIWQS needs to be maybe updated to reflect that it may not be in there, because there's other fields that have the hashtag instead of the star.
We can go back and revisit, why exactly we're calling it required. If it's in the enforcement policy, we're going to continue.
Correct. So I think, someone from OE should weigh in whether or not it is or isn't.
We can have I guess.
I thought Matt on the line.
We're not here to put anybody on the spot, right?
Oh, okay.
broken up, then that's fine, we can address it later. Thank you.
Hey, John, this is Joelle. I have a question about a third-party liability payment, liability payment to the third party. Well, there was an issue before about something that go to the Rose Foundation. I didn't record it in CIWQS, and Sarah was supposed to talk to Chris about that. Was the date on that?
So in this case, it's where it's not, unlike the SEP exam I was talking about earlier, where it's our own ACL specifies that money comes to us. It's just going to a third party, and we. So yeah, so we don't record the receivable. So there was talk to do different, but at this point in time, you said you're going to put it in CIWQS.
Thanks.
All right. Okay. So this is I'm with DAS, the unit, and we handle the invoicing and collections for ACLs. For currently just CIWQS is what this station is about. So, invoice is sent out. We usually give it about 15 business days or 15 days before we send a late notice, which is called demand for payment. And then if that's still, if we still have not received payment for that, 15 days after that due date, we'll send a second late notice, which is called a notice of violation. And I know there's some confusion because the notice of violation has different it means something different in the enforcement circle. But for us, we use this terminology for regular annual invoicing, which is the system that we integrated the ACL invoicing and collection into. So we're using the same terminology for ACLs that we do for our annual invoices. If we didn't receive payment for, after the notice of violation has been mailed out, about 15 days later, we'll send a final collection letter. Just to let you know, let me backtrack a little bit. Those 15 days are to allow accounting to post payment. So if payment is sent in on the last day due, it gives accounting a weeks to process and post the payment before we check and see it's been paid, so that we can either mark complete or generate the next late notice. So after the final collection letter, the final collection letter states that if payment is not received by a certain date, which is about 30 days from when we date on the collection letter, then we will turn the debt over to a collection agency. About 15 days after the date stated in the collection letter, it's still outstanding, and then before we send anything to our collection agency, we will notify the regional board enforcement coordinator with either the ACL or a list of ACLs that paid that should be going to the collection agency. So at that point, we'll let the regional board inform us whether or not something's going on. Even though petition and bankruptcy information is supposed to be input in the system, and it'll all be on the same page, it's just a double check to make sure there's nothing else going on, because there is so much weight with the ACL. So regional board enforcement coordinators will be notified that we plan to send something to the collection agency, and we'll get either yes or no, when we should send it, and then we discuss if there's something going on. We send our we leave someone have a question? We leave the accounts at the collection agency for approximately 1 year, and that's just to give the amount of time for them to track down the debtor, to make contact, and to try and attempt to collect. Something is that even though we offer, well, even the discharger might not have been offered a payment plan as part of their settlement, the collection agency can offer a payment plan, but it has nothing to do with the state board, and it's our payment plan. So, and the collection agency is paid based on a commission on what they collect. So they may be interested in offering, a payment plan so they can at least collect something for their efforts. It's just all or nothing. But it is not by any means a payment plan authorized by anyone here at the state board or the regional board. Once we an account at collections for a year, we have explored a couple of options. Weren't necessarily at that point. There's a write-off option with the state controller's office. There's potentially going to the general or other options that we haven't explored. And part of that reason is in June we just finished our first year of accounts being at the collection agency, and so we haven't really gotten into that step yet where we need to explore other options. We are sending those accounts to our new collection agency to see if they have better luck, but by the time the accounts go to the collection agency, if the debtor was going to pay, they would have paid. So the success rate for collection agency is but they want to, if they're not going to pay, they're not going to, if they're not going to pay us, they're not going to pay collection agency. So, but we have that as an option because we need to be able to prove when we go either to write it off or the Attorney General that we've made every possible effort to try to collect on that debt. So on this slide is payment plan acceleration. I mentioned it earlier when Jarmo was talking about payment plans and we were talking about documentation. We just begun this process, and it doesn't apply to very many ACLs, but if the payment plan in place and the discharger's been late in a payment or they've missed payments, we have the authority to accelerate the plan so that any remaining outstanding balance is due and payable immediately. However, we are not going to do this as soon as a payment is missed, as soon as a payment is late. But we are looking at them now so that if a payment is missed, we notify the regional board enforcement coordinator and let them know that we're considering accelerating the payment plan. And so the enforcement coordinator can tell us, they've had interaction with the discharger and they're just on their payment, or there's something going on that we're not aware of, or hopefully say go ahead and accelerate it because, if they're making payments, then they're supposed to be, there's no reason for us to continue and invoices for things they're not going to pay on. And the payment plan is us being generous, but it's an attempt to collect the full amount of the liability and make it manageable for them. But if they're not going to pay, then there's no point in us, can just send out invoices for payment plans. Okay, so
this slide is just to remind people that there are different reports that you can use to ACL information. One is the penalty project report, and that has information. The ACL report really is our more robust report for the ACL action, and also the ACL problematic report. We mentioned that earlier when we were talking about holds, but if something isn't being triggered right, matching up to information in FMS, generally that's when something goes on the problematic report. So those you can find under the Run Reports menu within CIWQS.
So the next slide has intranet, but so those that are looking for more information about this project, ACL conversion that happened 2.5 years ago, or need help with entries or whatnot, there's on the intranet site, which the next slide will show you the web address and everything. Some of this information, but there's an ACL project fact sheet on the enforcement intranet site, and there's also another one on the ACL intranet, the DS intranet site. You can look at the enforcement policy and enforcement action data entry process, and then you can go to the ACL intranet site, which is the one that DS fees administers. The link for the ACL intranet site, and it's on the DAS fees intranet site. There's a button that says ACL information. So on here you can find fact sheet. You can find the original webinar that was done a couple of years ago by JARMA, and FAQs, which we try to update, getting a lot of questions that are not already covered on the FAQs. So if there's something you think would be useful, go ahead and send it to us, and we're more than happy to update it. You also find a flow chart that was done back when we did the conversion 2.5 years ago, process for collections and the decision making that goes into the steps that should be taken. There's also a report of unpaid ACL receivables that's updated weekly. It wasn't updated this week on Monday because I was out of the office, but it's updated weekly. Usually we close the business on Monday, and unpaid receivables includes contingent liabilities and the regular account receivable liabilities. And unpaid doesn't necessarily mean past due. Once an invoice is generated, we consider it paid, goes on the report. There's also a link to our invoice, which is used also for the annual fee search by dischargers. So the discharger should be able to go on if they have an ACL and do a search by WDID. And there's also a link to the payment website, which allows payments to be made for ACL invoices through EFT only right now, electronic fund transfer. We don't have the capability to do credit card payments right now, but if they wanted to do an EFT payment, they go on this payment website. Need the invoice number. Okay, so I know that we've been getting a lot of questions about SMARTs, ACLs, and we understand that SMARTs, ACLs, there's a real need for them to be converted for DAS fees to manage the invoicing and collections for SMARTs. The CIWQS project was just taken on initially, and the plan was to do SMARTs pretty soon after, but there is a lack of resources available to help us build that between SMARTs and FMS. So currently, we don't have the ability to invoice and collect for SMARTs. The time for this is hopefully next year sometime before summer. But, as you're aware, more priorities come up. It keeps getting pushed to the back burner. So there's a lot of other projects and very, very few IT resources. But management is made aware of this almost on a monthly, if not weekly basis. It's important, it has to go on, but try to keep you updated. There's an option for us, for DASVs, to send ACL debt to our collection agency, and it's the same process we use for sending other debt here at the board that's not annual fees to the collection agency, such as dishonored checks or human resources type debt, TECs, things like that. So the process, and I'll send something out shortly or post something on our ACL information internet site. But basically, at a regional board level, you need to send out the required 3 notifications, and then send that information to us. And we have a sheet that we've been doing a trial with Region 5 on. So we have a cover sheet and some process, some procedures written up. Once we finalize them, hopefully by the end of this month, we'll be able to post them for you guys. But there's a way, for you to send small ACL debt to questions. If you're ready right now, give me a call and we can go over it. Oh, that's information. Is there anything else in that? Okay.
Before we open up to questions, I did want to clarify that the ACL FM project fact sheet was actually done by Erin Mustaine, and she was instrumental to the original project. So I want to give her credit there. But questions, we can address those. And we are recording this, so it will be posted. If you're not aware, we're changing service, WebEx for sharing services, and so I'm not sure when we'll have it posted after the conversion from WebEx, but we will make sure to get it back up there, and we'll also post the slides to the PowerPoint.
Norma, where can we find a copy of the presentation? Is it somewhere in our internet site?
Well, I always post it with our other webinar information. They always post the steps as well, and I think Sarah said that she'd put it on that ACL invite that she referred to earlier.
Okay, thank you.
This is Russ in Region 4.
Hi.
Hi. Just a question on the policy at DS for when you receive a check, between the time you receive a check and entering it into FMS and then CIWQS.
Okay. The line or?
Yeah, how many days from when you receive a check to get put into CIWQS?
So, I think we'll deposit all checks within one or that business day that it's received. But they have a multi-step process to deposit and then post the payment. So we allow them up to 2 weeks to go through that process. And it all depends on their workload. It could be done within 2 to 3 business days. It could be done up to that weeks. It depends if we're doing annual fee invoicing as well. Like right now, they're going to be extremely busy, so it might take them the 2 full weeks. They don't just enter ACL information. But once it's into FMS, we can see it in FMS that day, but you'll be able to see it in CIWQS the next business day. Does that answer your question?
It does. So if we need to know about a certain payment between the time it gets deposited and into FMS, there's really no way we can follow up on that. Is that right?
There is potentially a way. It depends on how much information you have and what's going on. But you can send me that information, and we'll help you work with accounting to try and track it down if you have a question about a payment during that time frame.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, no problem.
A way that you can that discharger, sometimes we get the question that a discharger wants to know if payment was received. They can check their bank for a copy of the cleared check, and it'll have information on the back of the check, and we can help track it down to make sure that it's posted properly. If they are just overly concerned, or if they've had, they have a problem with it, if they look at the back of the canceled check, it has our information, and we can help them out with that. If you have a question about a check, like Russ was talking about in that time frame, make sure to get the check number from the discharger, so it will help immensely accounting entry on the check. It will help them track it down quicker.
Hi, Sarah. Can I interrupt for a minute? This is Tanya from accounting in the revenue unit.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify that the identification number that we need to track the check is on the front of the check and not on the back. And an 8-digit number.
The CN number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Can you put your hi, this is Ralph from District 5. Can you put your, there you go. Thank you.
Question?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to do a March noticing, the second notice. You guys use notice of violation. Dave Williams started this process, and he's got something that's called a demand for payment. Does it matter? Do you guys what call this? It may, my supervisor's looking at it now, but I'm just wondering if you guys have an opinion on that.
It actually doesn't matter. You can call it first, second, and third late notice. That's basically what the other divisions here that send us debt use. So, like first, second, and final, first, second, and third, whatever you want to call it, as long as you're consistent.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. As Sarah put her contact information, so if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to contact her. You could also contact me, but thank you for participating in the webinar today, and have a great day.
All right, thank you. Great.
Thanks, Jeremy.